6 minutes of horror. Tonight, the victims of Britain's first mass shooting in a decade are named. Among them, the gunman's mother, who was the first to be shot dead. 4 others were also killed at random here in Plymouth, including a 3-year-old girl in front of horrified onlookers.
I said, there's shooting, it's violent, it's terrifying. It literally felt like a living nightmare. I felt like I was being hunted. It was horrible.
22-year-old Jake Davison legally owned the gun he used. He later shot himself. Tonight, his motive is unclear. Police have ruled out any links with terrorism. We'll have all the latest also tonight. Afghanistan on the brink as the Taliban captures more big cities and closes in on the capital. And Britney's victory over her father as he agrees to give up control of her life.
This is the ITV Evening News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening from Plymouth, a city still coming to terms with the events that took place here just 24 hours ago. Last night, a little after 6 o'clock, a gunman shot dead 5 people, among them his mother and a little girl just 3 years old. Well, Jake Davison's killing spree lasted just 6 minutes before he turned his weapon on himself. Police today confirmed the 22-year-old was in possession of a gun licence. The Prime Minister tonight said that should be properly investigated. Well, our first report comes from our UK editor, Paul Brands.
A yellow tent tells you where, but not yet why, his victims were chosen. In Plymouth, police search for answers which may never truly be found. Can anything explain the motives of a man who mostly let luck decide which lives he took and which lives he traumatised?
A couple of the gunshots went off and I ran opposite a pub and the owner came out and he shouted at me. He just went, get in here now. And so I forward rolled into the pub and I literally clung underneath one of the pool tables, hung on for dear life, and I froze. He locked the door and he closed the windows. And my mum sent me a message saying, hide, stay safe, stay down, lock yourself away.
Outside, 22-year-old Jake Davison was targeting others, seemingly at random. His weapon, believed to be a pump-action shotgun. Police were first alerted to gunfire at 11 minutes past 6 last night in the Keyham area of Plymouth. It had begun at a house on Biddick Drive, where Jake Davison's first victim was his own mother, 51-year-old Maxine Davison. He then left the house and took his gun onto the street, where his second victim would be his youngest, killing 3-year-old Sophie Martin and her father, Lee Martin. Moving further along Biddick Drive, he shot and injured 2 other adults before turning into a park, where he killed 59-year-old Stephen Washington, and then onto Henderson Place, where he shot 66-year-old Kate Shepherd, who died in hospital.
The 6th life taken was Davison's own. 12 minutes after police were first called, his killing here was over. Officers didn't have to fire a single shot. He'd turned his gun on himself.
Today, police were left investigating the worst shooting in Britain since 2010.
We believe we have an incident that is domestically related, that has spilled into the street and seen several people within Plymouth losing their lives in an extraordinarily tragic circumstance.
Do you know if the gunman had a licence for his weapon, and what was the motive for his attack? Do you have any idea about that yet?
We can confirm that Mr Davison is a firearms licence holder. I'm unable to confirm whether that was the firearm that was used. So there is no motive as we know at present. Again, that will be subject to inquiry, but we are at the moment not considering terrorism or a relationship with any far-right group or any such other group.
You know, love is for the young.
But police will be analysing rambling videos Davison posted like this one, appearing to identify with a sexist internet subculture, men who call themselves incels or involuntary celibates.
Nothing's changed. Like, I'm still in the same position, same period in life. Still a this, that, virgin, fat, ugly, whatever you want to call it. What's changed?
Those kind of thoughts have been linked to violence before, raising concerns about why he had a gun licence.
Clearly, I will be asking questions, definitely in terms of local policing and raising this with the Chief Constable.
But tonight, the main puzzle for police: why did Jake Davison kill his own mother and 4 others he may not have known at all? Paul Brand, ITV News, Plymouth.
Throughout the day, people have been coming to the area to lay flowers and leave messages for those who died. Some who knew the victims, some who just wanted to pay their respects. The local MP today described what happened here as the city's darkest day. Our correspondent Rebecca Barry has been speaking to those who call this estate home and remain, of course, in shock tonight. Rebecca.
Yes, well, all day people have been coming here to this school, which has been turned into a kind of community support centre. And I've spoken to several people who are clearly suffering, in shock, deeply disturbed by what they saw on their own doorsteps. What James witnessed last night will no doubt stay with him forever. He was walking home when he saw a woman being shot and killed.
I ran over to some kids who were sat on the rock and was like, can you go home? Because just heard 2 gunshots. Next thing you know, someone walked past with a gunshot like that and bang. I just like had to go run back to my mum because I was like, I don't know what to do. And then I started breaking down in tears in my room because I was like, this shouldn't be every day, shouldn't it? It's just wrong.
It must have been terrifying. Are you okay?
Yeah, a bit of anxiety's playing up though, so.
His friend Caitlin watched as the emergency services tried in vain to save the woman.
All of a sudden, they just stopped after 10 minutes. And I thought, oh, maybe they saved the person's life and stuff like that. But they didn't rush to put the person in the ambulance, so I could only assume the worst.
So often, it's at the worst of times that people come together. In Plymouth today, we saw just that. Donations and volunteers arriving at a school transformed into a support centre for those traumatised by last night's events.
I'm still shaken.
Carol was walking through the area with her 7-year-old son.
My heart is racing and thinking, you know, we could have come around that corner and he could have been there. You start to think what could have happened, and yeah, it's just so scary.
In this historic coastal city, a shooting is shocking enough, let alone one like this.
One of the darkest days in our city's history.
The local MP says this neighbourhood has been deeply affected.
Keam is a community where you do know your neighbours, where the community has a real sense of identity and strength in that identity. And any shooting is awful, but the idea that a child's been involved in it and that we've lost that child, I think is something that is so truly awful.
Many people here are now left trying to process that trauma. Rebecca Barry, ITV News, Plymouth.
Well, there are questions tonight about how Jake Davison was allowed to own a gun despite Britain having some of the strictest gun laws in the world. As it stands, shotguns and sporting rifles can be owned by anyone with a licence. To get one, police must assess whether or not an individual poses a threat to the public using interviews, references and GP records. The person has to have a good reason to own a gun, for example, for hunting or shooting for sport. And licences are reviewed every 5 years. Well, Paul joins me now, and Paul, yeah, there will be questions for the authorities about this, won't there?
Yeah, police are asking questions tonight, but questions are also being asked of them. The Prime Minister said there should be an investigation into what happened. We know Jake Davison had a licence. What we don't know is whether that licence was for the specific gun that he used last night. Police still not confirming that that was a pump-action shotgun. When I spoke to the Chief Constable here earlier today, he made it pretty clear, I think, that there is some kind of history here between Jake Davison and the police. Of course, anyone with a licence has a history, as you've just been saying. It's the police who oversee those licences, but it feels like perhaps something more here to emerge in the coming days. And certainly watching Jake Davison's final YouTube video posted 2 weeks ago, he looked pretty agitated. He talked about having mental health problems. I think a big question tonight about whether someone with a mind and a hand as unstable as that potentially should have hold of a trigger.
Yeah. All right, Paul, thanks for the moment. We'll speak to you later on. Thank you. Well, let's move on to some of the day's other big stories. And the Prime Minister has been holding crisis talks in Downing Street over the situation in Afghanistan. Hundreds of British troops are already on their way to the capital, Kabul, to help support the evacuation of UK nationals. In the last 24 hours, the Taliban have continued their sweep of the country's south, making gains towards the capital. The second city of Kandahar has been taken. Lashkar, the capital of Helmand, once home to the British military, fell this morning. And with Ghazni now under insurgent control, Kabul is well within Taliban sights. With the latest, here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina.
This is what some would say failure looks like. American helicopters preparing to evacuate thousands of US nationals from the embassy in Kabul. After 20 years of conflict, Britain is pulling out too. The hasty end, it's claimed, was part of a plan. But it's the Taliban who took back control of Kandahar today who seem to be dictating the timetable. 12 cities are now under their control, including Lashkar in Helmand, the province where in 2009 Private Richard Hunt from Abergavenny was fatally wounded. His mother says it all seems such a waste.
I feel sad for both Richard and the Afghan people, because Richard lost his life and it now all seems to be for nothing, and the Afghan people have been through numerous areas of war for 40 years or more.
With the Taliban's white flag flying in Kandahar, many fear it won't be long before Kabul itself falls. Here the Prime Minister said British troops had not died in vain, but insisted he had no option but to order the evacuation.
I think we've got to be realistic about the abilities of the UK or any power to impose a military solution, a combat solution in Afghanistan. What we certainly can do is work with all our partners in the region and around the world who share an interest in, with us in preventing Afghanistan from once again becoming a breeding ground for terror.
But one former soldier who completed 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan says pulling out completely now is a mistake.
It's heartbreaking, and what hurts so much is because it was just so avoidable. The decision to withdraw, it was staggering. I mean, possibly the greatest strategic misjudgment since the invasion of Iraq, quite honestly.
Meanwhile, a former chief of the Defence Staff, Lord Richards, says the US and Britain have squandered much credibility.
It's a pretty drastic thing to say, but, you know, I reckon people might think Russia was a more stalwart ally in adversity than the West. And that does not send a very good message about Western intent and resolve.
The reality on the ground is that thousands are now fleeing the fighting, with little hope that the Afghan government, standing alone, can win against the Taliban. Libby Vina, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, why Britney's father has agreed to step out of her life. Plus, the renewed effort to fix the shortage of truck drivers. And of course, we'll have more from here in Plymouth after the break. Welcome back. Britney Spears is celebrating a major victory in her battle to wrestle control of her life away from her father. Jamie Spears has been in charge of nearly every aspect of the pop star's affairs since 2008. But now he says he will step down as her conservator, although he hasn't said exactly when, as Geraint Vincent reports.
Social media is Britney's favourite means of communication with her fans, and in this video posted just after her father announced that he would be stepping down from managing her affairs, she looked like she might have been celebrating. Britney Spears has been in control of the pop superstar's financial affairs since she suffered a mental health crisis some 13 years ago. New court documents say that he doesn't believe a public battle with his daughter over his continuing service as her conservator would be in her best interests. Mr. Spears intends to work with the court and his daughter's new attorney to prepare for an orderly transition to a new conservator. Britney Spears filed a petition to remove her father from having control over her $60 million fortune last summer. It claimed that he'd used the arrangement to force her to perform against her will and to stop her from getting married again and having more children. The conservatorship gave rise to the Free Britney movement, who've protested outside every court hearing.
There's no time frame, we don't really know how soon he'll be removed. That's what I think will be the next step, get Jamie out and hopefully get a professional in so we can move forward with terminating the entire arrangement.
Britney Spears has denied any wrongdoing, saying he only wants the best for his daughter. Her lawyers describe his announcement as vindication, and they say their investigation of his conduct will continue. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
A serving police officer and a young child have been found dead in a house in Kidderminster in the West Midlands. Police were called to the property following concerns for the welfare of the 39-year-old man and 3-year-old child. Their deaths are currently being treated as unexplained. The fall in coronavirus infections appears to have halted, with the latest data showing cases have flatlined or are increasing across the country. England's R number, the rate at which the virus reproduces, has decreased slightly. It is now between 0.8 and 1. And the Deputy Leader of Westminster Council has resigned after the costs of a tourist attraction spiralled to £6 million. The Marble Arch Mound was supposed to offer spectacular views over London, but has been widely criticised for how underwhelming it is. In recent weeks, we've seen images of empty supermarket shelves across the country, and while COVID is partly to blame, so too is a shortfall of some 100,000 lorry drivers, and that's prompted a campaign to attract more women into the industry. Currently, they account for less than 3% of HGV drivers, as our consumer editor Chris Choi has been finding out.
The A1, busy with freight, but look closely and you see this is very largely a man's world.
This is my bed, nice and cosy. Also in here I have a fridge.
Only between 1% and 3% of HGV drivers are women.
In truck stops, yards, sometimes you see a crowd of men and you see either talk, oh there's a lady truck, oh yeah. It depends how you look, what you wear, etc., as to what their comments are, basically.
Would they make comments about how you look and what you wear?
Oh yes, they do.
This huge gender imbalance is adding to a widespread shortage of workers in haulage. Brexit meant a lot of EU drivers have left, and the pandemic means that many new recruits can't get training or tests. Our research shows the growing impact. In grocery, retailers are offering big bonuses to sign up HGV drivers. £1,000 at Tesco, up to £5,000 incentives from a delivery firm that works with M&S. In construction, the shortage is causing widespread disruption and delays. One major waste disposal firm told us 20% of its driver roles are now vacant. With a shortage of 100,000 HGV drivers in the UK, this sector needs women.
This is a serious problem. We've got a huge part of the workforce that we're not properly tapping into, so we need to be taking steps to ensure that we can be a much more attractive career choice for women. So we need to be looking at things like driver welfare facilities.
Right, we're going to take the next turn right.
Hayley O'Burns is learning to be an HGV driver despite her concerns.
I've seen instances where they've put it on Facebook groups of women driving trucks. So I look at this and they're, objectifying them and things, and I'm like, well, that puts you off doing it.
The industry will soon send female HGV drivers into schools, aiming to change perceptions, but it could be a long haul. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Well, parts of southern Europe continue to face an intense heat wave, with forecasters warning it could get worse in the coming days. Temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius were recorded in Sicily today. The Italian government has placed 15 cities on its highest alert level. In Spain, Andalusia and Catalonia are the worst affected regions. Well, let's return now to events here in Plymouth, where all day today people have been paying their respects and leaving flowers for the 5 people killed during a 6-minute killing spree last night. Tonight we've learnt their names and that the first of the victims was the gunman's mother, Maxine Davison. A 3-year-old girl and her father were among the others. And Paul joins me now. Paul, just hearing it all, it's just a very shocking 24 hours for this city, but the whole country as well.
Yeah, and Lucrezia again tonight, a relatively rural police force is dealing with the worst mass shooting since Derek Bird killed 12 in Cumbria in 2010. And this evening around 9 o'clock, there'll be a vigil for Jake Davison's 5 victims. His motives, though, feel fairly mixed here. What would lead him on the one hand to kill his own mother, on the other to kill what seemed to have been relative strangers? It is difficult to reconcile those motives. Tonight his crimes feel fairly conflicting. Yeah, well, tonight, as you say, time for mourning, but also there will be questions as well. Paul, absolutely. Thank you. Well, that is all from here in Plymouth on a day the local MP described as one of the darkest in this city's history. There will be more on the terrible events of last night with Raggy. He will be back with the news at 10:20, but from me and all of the team here in Plymouth, goodbye.
Today, in some places, it could be pouring, but don't worry, it'll only be in very isolated areas. Heinz Salad Cream sponsors ITV National Weather.
A very good evening to you. A mixed few days. We've got cloudy skies for some of us through the weekend, together with dribs and drabs of rain, some heavier downpours, and also some welcome spells of sunshine. Much of the action from the west in the next 48 hours as this system rolls its way in from the mid-Atlantic. It'll bring some steadier rain from time to time, particularly on Sunday through Western England and Wales. And where it stays dry, where the cloud gives up, well, some decent August sunshine making all the difference this time of year. A fine end to the day, late sunshine before dusk for the lucky ones, but blustery downpours continue to feed in across northern and western Wales. Here in Shelter Glens, it will turn a little cooler tonight. Elsewhere, relatively mild night and clearer skies into the small hours. A promising start to the weekend. Some lovely sunshine from the word go this Saturday. Just the remnants of overnight cloud and patchy rain through parts of Cambridgeshire and North Norfolk there. Otherwise, cheerful sunshine as we go into Saturday. Just a little more cloud wafting its way in through the afternoon. Some dribs and drabs of rain, as I mentioned, on and off through those western zones. Blustery downpours once more through Scotland. But even with the cloud cover, those temperatures looking half decent. Highs of 24 or 25 degrees. A mild, if warm and slightly muggy feel, particularly across the southeast through the afternoon. Into Sunday, well, a little more going on across the north and the west. Blustery downpours once more through Scotland, together with some warm sunshine. The same goes for Northern England and Northern Ireland. Some steadier rain for Wales and the West Country. A bit of a breeze here. Warmer in the east. Some lovely sunshine, but also some hefty downpours to come.
Heinz Salad Cream sponsors ITV National Weather.